Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Vice President CIO Bang Min-sik of Six Ventures. I'm going to moderate today's session. This session is held by AFOB, which is a co-organizer of the conference. This workshop is being held under the theme of Predicting the Economy after COVID-19. Prevention and control, diagnosis, vaccine, treatment were covered in the session 2. Now at the session 4, we will cover social and economical impact of COVID on the world. We have 3 economic experts who are going to touch on how our economy and investment trends will change. Then I'd like to introduce the first speaker, Professor Insuk Cheong of Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. He earned degrees, master's and doctorate degree at SNU, and also he earned doctoral degrees at Princeton. And at ICT think tank, he served as a member of it, and now he is a professor of Hankuk University of Foreign Studies at the Department of Economics. And also, he is the president of Korean Society for Bioeconomy. His presentation will be carried out under the theme of COVID-19 pandemic, socio-economic impact and response. Good afternoon. I am President Chung In-suk of Korean Society for Bioeconomy. It's disappointed to say hello to you online. Under the theme of socio-economic impact and response, I'm going to deliver my presentation. So, in 2016, Korean Society for Bioeconomy was established for bioeconomy, bioinnovation, and politics and policies research. So, not only economy, management, law, health, agriculture, and other bio-related areas, we have many experts, and they gathered together to create this Korean Society for Bioeconomy. It is an interdisciplinary academic society. Your support would be very much appreciated. I'm going to talk about this. First is main and major impacts or implications of COVID-19 on our economy. And next is economic policies and prevention and control policies. And regarding the COVID-19, there are so many issues around it. But I'm going to touch on Korean New Deal policy and bio-innovation. I'm going to share my thoughts with you. COVID-19 in many aspects has affected our daily lives, and I'm going to talk about 7 elements. First, untaxed economy. Now we are experiencing an untaxed economy, and regarding this, the use of digital technologies has been facilitated. And third, security or safety. It has become our major and primary concern. And fourth, interest and attention has been paid to biotechnologies, and also people have paid a lot of attention to the environment as well. And regarding quarantine, the size of the government has become bigger. And last but not least, when it comes to international trade and international order, changes have been happening. Other than these 7 elements I mentioned before, there are so many issues around the COVID-19, but I'm going to briefly touch on these 7 issues. So I'm going to touch on policy response and further spread of COVID-19 economy-wise. So this is the data released by the Korean government in 2020 in the first quarter. YOY GDP dropped by 1.3%, and in the second quarter it went down 3.3%. And in July and in August, I believed we made some rebound in the third quarter, but because of the second wave in September, in October, I believe economic growth rate would not be what we expected before. So I don't think the reality will not be like this graph. But despite these challenges and difficult situations, our situation is better than other countries. And next is health policies and economic policies and the relationship between them and a dilemma. Currently, there has been a dilemma like this: health versus economy. And some say life versus livelihood. So which one should we choose? This is a dilemma. In the early stage of the COVID-19, the government took NPI, non-pharmaceutical intervention policies. In the first place, the aim was to flatten the curve. As you can see here, you can see the peak here, and the graph went down. It shows the graph when doing nothing. So the number of confirmed cases peaked and went down. Then the capacity of health system would be exceeded. So in the orange area, there are so many people, so they might die of the COVID-19. So we needed to lower the peak so that with current medical resources, we can save people. But the thing is, if we lower the peak, then the transmission will last longer, so that the graph itself would move to the right side. So it means that the virus will stay longer than we expected. So let's look at the graph economy-wise on the right side. You can see the graph hitting the bottom and rebounds. This is the graph when implementing quarantine and prevention and control measures. It will take a long time to recover to what it was before, and the goal of these policies was to mitigate economic impacts caused by economic policies. That was the ultimate goal of the economic policies. But in the early phase, quarantine is the major goal, and economic policies are auxiliary policies to afford the recovery of the economy. Of course, it would be applied to the early stage. But so far, we cannot focus only on flattening the curve or prevention and control or quarantine. We need to make a balance between mitigation of the economic impact and quarantine and prevention and control. And next, I'm going to talk about two issues. First is Korean New Deal policy, and the other one is bioinnovation. Recently, the government announced the Korean New Deal policy. It is composed of three elements. First is Digital New Deal, second is Green New Deal, and the last one is safety net. Safety net is related to employment. By 2025, this New Deal policy will be carried out to create new jobs, and a lot of money will be poured into this project. And what is the goal of this kind of policy and project? Basically, it is about boosting the economy. It is a growth package policy. But in a crisis like this pandemic, and when we are in an economic recession, then What should be the goal of the government? This is the question we need to ask ourselves. I'm going to divide into three: relief, recover, and support. First, relief. We need to first rescue people from water, those who lose their jobs or those who have to shut down their businesses or some enterprises that went bankrupt. If people lose their jobs and if enterprises are shut down, then that would be the problem of our economy, not just their problems. So we need to rescue them first. And next, recovery. It means that we need to bring the economy back to the normal that we had before the COVID-19. And last one, support, is about making a better world to live in. So support, I believe the Korean New Deal policy is a supportive policy to take the economy to higher level. But personally, I believe we need to focus a bit more on relief and recovery. So economic supportive measures like New Deal policy, I believe it is a bit too early. Of course, the government is not saying that they will only do this. It is a long-term plan that will be carried out by 2025. But the problem is, because of this, if we care relief and recovery less than the support, then that will be the problem. Let's look at the Digital New Deal first. DNA has been emphasized by the government: data, network, and AI. So it means the transformation into the economy, digital economy. So when it comes to SOC, we should be committed to digitalization. So that is the goal of the Digital New Deal. And personally, I'd like to point out this, and I pointed out this before, in the process of digital economy, going to digital economy, or in the process of digitalization, the most important thing is, rather than technology or investment, I believe regulation reform is important. So privacy or its conflict with other values might be hold digitalization back. Some might make profits and some might lose something. So I believe the best in case is TADA, which is a mobility service. TADA or remote medicine, if you look at them, the government has emphasized that they would pursue it, but in case where there is a conflict of interest, then the government take a step back. So digitalization of the economy, I'm not sure whether the government has willingness for it. But there are also positive things and optimistic things. So resolving conflicts is really difficult. So in this regard, this is not only the problem of the government, it is the problem of our society. And regarding bio-related workers, I believe bio-related workers must work together. And next is Green New Deal. It is an environmental and low carbon transformation. So make city and make our lives green, and green innovation system building. So these are the main content of Green New Deal. If you look at detailed policies of Green New Deal, you may wonder why the government is trying to pursue this. The answer is to boost the economy. So for economic growth, can we justify this kind of Green New Deal policy? There may be some questions regarding this, but I believe we should go to Green New Deal. So last year, before the pandemic, there was a Green Deal focusing on green innovation. Well, because of this COVID pandemic, interest has become lowered. And if you look at Europe in 2015, making the environment green and the sustainability have been driven very strong by the government. And with this, the European government is not trying to make their economy grow. Of course, it would be helpful for economic growth, but economic growth is just one of many goals. That is not the sole goal of their projects. And I believe the economic growth should not be the only and sole goal of Green New Deal. It might be appropriate for a longer term project, but there might be more efficient policies for economic growth. But since we are not trying to pursue only economic growth, that's why the government is pushing forward Green New Deal. Basically, one of the goals is to change the way we think about the world, and we need to have a perspective that we should not pollute the environment and we should not destroy the earth while having a good life. But there are some contrasting points as well. But as we can see, sustainability and circular economy on this slide. Since 2015 in Europe, these concepts have been emphasized. In Europe, bioeconomy was started 10 years ago. And in Europe, this term bioeconomy means biological renewable energy. We should replace non-renewable energy resources so that we can create a sustainable economy. So we should not see this New Deal policy as only and sole growth policy. We should see it as a policy for sustainability as well. And in conclusion, regarding bioinnovation, I'm going to touch on only one point. We need to have a systemic view. We need to have a systemic way of thinking. Some economists said innovation is about creating new intelligence and new technology so that a new market is created and consumers will be able to consume new products, thereby increasing their happiness. Innovation is about co-evolution of technology and institution. And technology is at most half of the story, so there is still a long way to go to reach the happiness of humanity. And to connect technology into happiness, then we need institution. But institution means law, market, conditions, culture, and people's perspectives and perceptions. All this should be equipped. In particular, bioinnovation has been taking care this kind of institutions less than any other things. So the COVID-19 will be a big opportunity for bioinnovation. So because people started thinking about the importance of bioinnovation, so we need to think about these two at the same time. And I'd like to make some policy suggestions first. As I mentioned before, when it comes to bioinnovation, we need a systemic approach. So not just making new technologies or new intelligence, but there are many areas, including market and areas for institutionalization. So all those areas should be covered as well. One of the big characteristics of bioinnovation is that no one can do bioinnovation alone. So many people in the many areas should be connected with each other. So I believe the most important characteristics of bioinnovation, which should be emphasized, is that linkage and cooperation. So connectivity and cooperation are the most important elements. So and cooperation between academia and industry should be established. But still, we have seen not connected industry and academia. Cooperation between academia and institution is not something new, but for that I believe fundamental changes are needed. Of course, that kind of cooperation between academia and industry is not an easy task because they have different characteristics. So cooperation between them is very tough task. So that's why we need more research and efforts. And one more thing, bioinnovation should be seen as an innovation drive for national growth. So we had lessons learned from digitalization policies. So in a national policy agenda, we need to make bioinnovation at higher level. So it's related with systemic views. So capabilities of many people should be connected and should be converged together. If you let people do anything in the market, then coordination failure would occur because no one wants to go alone because everyone wants to go together. So the government should play a role to consolidate people's efforts and people's capabilities. So it should be a national agenda. And I believe and I hope the COVID-19 will provide a good opportunity for us. So for bioinnovation, we need policy governance improvement. And evidence-based policies are required. In particular, Ministry of Science and ICT, I believe they have a role to play. But since there are so many related ministries and departments, we need coordination between leaderships. And to back up this kind of policy research for bio-related studies are required. A number of experts have no evidence or data. They just talk about their own suggestions or their own theories. We need to think about what kind of possibilities out there in an objective manner. So based on research, a reasonable evidence and reasonable logic, is needed to create a policy. And when it comes to bio, privacy and life ethics are related as well. So communication with the society is required, and we need to make an effort for communication with the society. So regarding bio, I just made policy suggestions, and with this, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Professor Cheong, for your presentation. As you mentioned before, you are now serving as president of Korean Society of Bioeconomies, and he touched upon socio-economic impact and response of COVID-19 pandemic and the directions of government policies. And taking this opportunity, I hope the bio industry will take another leap forward as a next growth engine of the national economy.